Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome devotees to morning Bhagavatam class. This morning we will be continuing with Canto 1, Chapter 12, verse 3. And the chapter is entitled The Birth of Emperor Parikshit, new chapter, starting into the new verses. And we have His Grace Dronacharya Prabhu from ISKCON, Philadelphia, joining us. Hare Krishna Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Gurudev Srila Prabhupada.
Please accept my messages. Jai Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Gurudev. Good morning, Harrisburg family. It's great to be with you. Hope everybody had a nice weekend. And we'll start with Jai Radha Madhava. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradari Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Jaya Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Kunja Bihari Yamuna Tiravanachari Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribrajikacharya Ashwatama Shishi Mahatis Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribrajikacharya Shishi Mahatis Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur Maharaj Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Gangamaya Yamuna Maya Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Nitai Gora Premanande Hari Haribo. All glories the assembled devotees Hare Krishna. All glories the assembled devotees Hare Krishna. All glories the assembled devotees Hare Krishna. All glories, the lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Namom Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Tirtha Swami iti namine. Namaste Krishna Padaya Prabhupada Ashwatama Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Bhakti Tirtha iti namine. Namom Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami iti namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarine. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayit Nastu Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtuti.
There's some feedback, right?
Yeah, and sorry if you could hear that. I have an alarm.
Oh, it's okay.
It was actually, it's cows mooing. I don't
I
know.
was wondering, am I hearing animals from the farm? Farm animals.
I don't
That's
know
cool.
if you could hear that or not.
That's nice.
Sorry about that.
No problem, Dronja, no problem.
Then I had to exit out of the full screen to get there.
No problem.
So today, as Mother Anasuya mentioned in the beginning, we are in the first canto. We are chapter 12, Birth of Emperor Parikshit, and we are just at the beginning of the chapter, text number 3. Taridam shortam ichamo, gaditam yadi manyase, bruhina sharadananam, yasya gyanam adach chukaha. The synonyms: tat, all, idam, this, strotam, to hear, it's chamaha, all willing, gaditam, to narrate, yadi, if, manyase, you think, bruhi, please speak, na, we, shraddhadananam, who are very much respectful, yasha, whose, Gyanam, transcendental knowledge, Adat, delivered, Sukhaha, Sri Shukadev Goswami. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We all respectfully want to hear about him, Maharaj Parikshit, to whom Shukadev Goswami imparted transcendental knowledge. Please speak on this matter. Purport. Shukadev Goswami imparted transcendental knowledge to Maharaj Parikshit during the remaining 7 days of his life, and Maharaj Parikshit heard him properly, just like an ardent student. The effect of such bona fide hearing and chanting of Srimad Bhagavatam was equally shared by both the hearer and the chanter. Both of them were benefited. Out of the 9 different transcendental means of devotional service to the Lord prescribed in the Bhagavatam, either all of them, or some of them, or even one of them are equally beneficial if properly discharged. Maharaj Parikshit and Shukadev Goswami were serious performers of the first 2 important items, namely the process of chanting and the process of hearing. And therefore, both of them were successful in their laudable attempt. Transcendental realization is attained by such serious hearing and chanting, and not otherwise. There is a type of spiritual master and disciple much advertised in this Kali Yuga. It is said that the master injects spiritual force into the disciple by an electrical current generated by the master. And the disciple begins to feel the shock. He becomes unconscious. And the master weeps for his exhausting his store of so-called spiritual assets. Such bogus advertisement is going on in this age, and poor common man are becoming a victim of such advertisement. We do not find such folk tales and dealings of Shukadev Goswami and his great disciple Maharaj Parikshit. The sage recited Srimad Bhagavatam in devotion, and the great king heard him properly. The king did not feel any shock of electrical current from his master, nor did he become unconscious while receiving knowledge from his master. One should not, therefore, become a victim to these unauthorized advertisements made by some bogus representative of Vedic knowledge. The sages of Namesharanya were very respectful in hearing about Maharaj Parikshit because of his receiving knowledge from Shukadev Goswami by the means of ardent hearing. Ardent hearing from a bona fide spiritual master is the only way to receive transcendental knowledge. And there is no need for medical performances or occult mysticism for miraculous effects. This process is simple, but only the sincere party can achieve the desired results. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Agyanata Varandasha Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umlitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Swapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakopatarubhyascha Kripasinduvi Vicha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We all respectfully want to hear about him, Maharaj Parikshit, to whom Shukadev Goswami imparted transcendental knowledge. Please speak on this matter. So we're turning another page in this great book of Srimad Bhagavatam. And for several chapters, there was a little bit of a detour away from Maharaj Parikshit. When you look at the chapters of this first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it starts off with the questions of the sages. And then the sages begin to, questions by the sages. And then Sutta Goswami, they select Sutta Goswami to be the one to answer these questions. Sutta Goswami begins to answer the questions, the six purposes, or six main questions of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then he goes into one of those questions was about Krishna and the source of all Krishna, as well as the incarnations and why they came here, why did they appear. And then they go into the appearance of Narada Muni, which was very important and relevant because it was Narada Muni who imparted the instruction, who gave the instruction to Srila Vyasadeva. Srila Vyasadeva, the literary incarnation of the Supreme Lord. He came to compile the Vedic literature. But he was despondent when he realized, after compiling all this spiritual knowledge, but he still felt that there was something that was incomplete. And Narada Muni had instructed him that the reason that you're feeling this way is because you did not specifically glorify all of the activities of Krishna, the Supreme Lord. You spoke about how to become pious in this world, how to perform various different sacrifices for different reasons. You explain the Supreme Lord from different categories of both, that he is all pervasive, the impersonal concept of the Supreme Lord. And then you gave little hints that the Supreme Lord is the Supreme Person, how the universe was created, and so on. But a work that exclusively spoke about the character, the qualities, and pastimes of the Supreme Lord was missing. And therefore Narada Muni told Vyasadeva to please write such a work. And upon writing it, Srila Vyasadeva had understood that that was the missing piece, and why he was feeling such a way. Therefore, the Srimad Bhagavatam is considered to be the cream of all Vedic literature. When you boil the milk, the cream rises to the top, and that is the most succulent, opulent byproduct. And then we get into right into this pastime then of Maharaj Parikshit, because the sages had wanted to know then, who had heard the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we understood that the birth of Maharaj Parikshit and what almost happened. So at the conclusion of the Mahabharata war, there was so much devastation, and there was only a few remaining survivors. And one of those survivors was Ashwatama. Ashwatama was the son of Dronacharya, the great heroic warrior, who was the military guru of the Pandavas and the Kauravas. Everybody that was present there, he was their military guru. Ashwatama, after his father had been killed, he became very, very, just his character had really changed. And he did some really heinous activities. Thinking that he was going to kill the 5 Pandavas, he actually wound up killing in his sleep the 5 sons of the Pandavas. And then after that, trying to kill Arjuna. He wanted to wipe out everybody. He wanted there to be no survivors from this war. So he tried to kill the Pandavas, but as well as the last remaining heir, to basically heir of the Pandavas. And so to basically kill off the dynasty. That remaining heir was at that time in the womb of Uttara, who was the wife of Abhimanyu, who was killed. Abhimanyu was the son of Arjuna. So Krishna at that time had appeared in the womb to protect Maharaj Parikshit. In order to keep this dynasty alive. And then it transitioned to the prayers of Queen Kunti. And Queen Kunti, because at that time Krishna, after saving, was ready to leave and go back to Dwarka. He had accomplished his reason for coming. But just about that time, Bhishma Dev was getting ready to leave his body. And he was saving that time because he wanted to leave in front of Krishna, and Krishna wanted to be there with his devotee as he was leaving. So he heard about the passing away of grandfather Bhishma in the presence of Lord Krishna. And then it was time for Krishna to depart for Dwarka. And we heard about how after the return from Kurukshetra to Hastinapur, the feelings that the devotees and the residents of Hastinapur had, and the affection that they had for Lord Krishna. And then we saw about Lord Krishna's entrance into Dwarka. As he returned to Dwarka, how he felt. Seeing after a while the residents and devotees of Dwarka, how they embraced him, how they worshipped him, how they greeted him, and then how he greeted them. Depending on who they were and their relationship, Krishna had an individual reciprocation with each and every one of them. And then after hearing about this, the sages once again are now saying, now please, let's get back to the, we want to hear about Parikshit, because Parikshit is at the center of the Srimad Bhagavatam, because he is the hearer of the Srimad Bhagavatam from Sukadev Goswami. And they wanted to hear, how did this emperor of the world come to only live for 7 days after he was cursed? And then during those 7 days, out of all the things he could have done, he chose to say, okay, I'm going to renounce it all, and I'm just going to perform this austerity of hearing on the banks of on a holy river, and just hear for 7 days until his departure. So they wanted to understand and hear about that, because it is that lesson that they have originally approached Sutta Goswami to hear about, these particular pastimes. And this particular verse, it stresses the importance of the hearing process. We respectfully want to hear about him, Maharaj Parikshit, to whom Sukadev Goswami imparted transcendental knowledge. Now, please speak on this matter. There's an eagerness behind these words. One, the sages were respectful. They respectfully wanted to hear. And they were eager to hear. This word ardent means that they were passionate, or they were very enthusiastic to want to hear. This is important. Any student that wants to advance in any realm of knowledge, they have to have some ambition, some eagerness to hear and to study. And the same is there with spiritual knowledge. It is not simply just a ritual. It can be taken this way, that this is a process of sadhana, so I have to just kind of do it. I have to attend Bhagavatam class, and it becomes a ritual. And something you can just kind of check off your list. Did you attend Bhagavatam class today? Yes, I was there. Check. Did you hear Srimad Bhagavatam today? Did you get any realization from Srimad Bhagavatam today? You know, what was your takeaway from Srimad Bhagavatam? That's a different category. You know, are you eager and enthusiastic to hear Srimad Bhagavatam? That's another category. I'll just make a couple comments of my observations through the years about hearing. You know, some struggles that I used to have, and they currently struggle with. I remember I used to struggle so hard with class, especially days when, I'd go to Mangalartik and I'd go when I was younger, I'd be there basically every day to Mangalarti. And by the time Srimad Bhagavatam class came, I was just tired. And it took me back to days when I was in high school. And I would always get English class at my first period. And the teacher would just read, and they'd have other people read, and I would just doze off. And I would doze off again. And several times I would find myself in Srimad Bhagavatam class just dozing off and just thinking, oh, I just can't wait for the kirtan to begin again, greeting the deities. And then there'll be some lively, it'll be something lively. And I would just sit there and thinking, okay, just you have to listen, it's part of the program. And, you would hear, and sometimes you would, learn something here and there. And it's my own immaturity. And of course, I was the one that was missing out. Because every day it's filled with Srila Prabhupada's purports, obviously the translation of what is happening in the Bhagavatam, but the nectar that also comes, realizations that come from the devotees who speak on the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then I have all other observations that I noticed, how a lot of times at our Sunday programs, speaking here in Philadelphia, but as I travel different places, I don't travel too much, but I've also noticed in some other places, and these are all just things to be aware of. Sometimes the class is just considered to be something secondary, not necessarily a primary activity. It is through this hearing, as Srila Prabhupada said, this hearing and chanting process, that transcendental realization is attained by such hearing and chanting and not otherwise. So sometimes the kirtan's over, people just go outside. They say, okay, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go have a drink of water, carry on a conversation. And then maybe I'll come in midway through the class and sit down and hear something. But, then throughout the class, you see people kind of get up, leave, and come back again. Get up, leave, come back again. Use the restroom. They come back because they forgot their bag. Then they go back again. In Philadelphia, we have like these ushers, because the doors, when it was designed in the temple room, it's like they kind of click, they slam shut. So people were going in and out so much that you could hear this click, click, click in class. So we'd have to have these ushers that would stand in the back that would open the doors for people. And the people would come in. Sometimes they could be coming late. They would sit halfway through the class and they would leave, come and leave. One day, we have the women's side and the men's side. One day I counted during the Sunday feast class, 70 times people were going in and out during the class. And I didn't even start counting during that time, because I was the usher, so I could count people going in and out. And I was there at one point, so it wasn't a criticism of any individual, but it was the observation of two things. One, that this eagerness to hearing is a struggle for most people. And it also made me realize that we also have to look for ways to transform the hearing process to make it more attractive for people. But even with that, the challenge comes to the individual, and to understand the importance of attentive hearing. Sometimes we would have people really interested in understanding. We have festivals coming, like we have Janmashtami coming up, and Lord Balaram's appearance day, and before that, we have Lord Nrsingadev's appearance day, and Lord Ramachandra's appearance day, and Purva Purnima, and so on. So many festivals. People would often come up and say, "What's the program schedule?" tell me, when is the Artik? A lot of times people just want to come for one part of the festival. They just want to come for the chanting. They're not too interested to hear about the class and other things they weren't so interested in hearing, but they want to know when the Abhishek is, they want to know the Kirtan is. Partially because they feel that's where the blessings are given. The blessings are given during the Artik. You get to touch the ghee lamp that's offered, smell the flowers, get the water offered to the Lord, get that on your head, and you feel like you've gotten some blessings. So this is, it's true, blessings are certainly there. But how many takeaways does a person usually get? How many life-transforming experiences, understanding that actually has a way to transform our mind do we get during these ceremonies? Of course, impressions are left, and the chanting, above anything else, purifies the heart. But when we lack an understanding of who we're chanting to, when we lack a depth of eagerness to learn about the qualities of the Supreme Lord, who we're performing these activities for, then we have to question, how deep can our devotion really go? How impactful will the chanting and the artiks and the other activities, devotional activities, how much of an impact will they really have? If we're not learning about this person, the Supreme Lord, God, Krishna, who we are worshiping. So therefore, this process of hearing and chanting is especially being focused on. And it's not just chanting, it's hearing and chanting. Shravanam, Kirtanam. The first two processes of devotional service. Now, there are 9 processes of devotional service. Shravanam, Kirtanam, hearing and chanting. Smaranam, remembering. So the first two, they lead to smaranam. When you're constantly engaged in hearing about and speaking about and chanting the Lord's names, speaking about the pastimes of the Lord, hearing the pastimes of the Lord, what happens? That's what we remember, smaranam. Pada sevanam, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, rendering some practical service in the temple, serving the deities. Archanam, offering performing deity worship, performing the artik ceremonies, dressing the deities, bathing the deities. This is the, very important service to enhance our devotional attitude and our devotional love for Krishna. Vandanam, offering prayers to the Lord, praying to the Lord with a sincere heart. Dasyam, becoming the Lord's servant. Sakyam, becoming the Lord's friend. And Atmanivedanam, giving everything that one has, surrendering body, mind, and soul to the Lord. And the Srimad Bhagavatam tells us, as stated in this purport, that just one of these processes is enough to actually develop pure love of God. And these can be practiced all together, some of them, or only one of them. That is the power of these processes of devotional life. However, what is recommended for us, especially in this age of Kali, is that we cannot ignore, we cannot jump over, we cannot neglect this process of Shravanam and Kirtanam. In fact, it is this Shravanam and Kirtanam, this hearing and chanting, that is the foundation of all other aspects of devotional life. If we neglect Shravanam and Kirtanam, there will be no value to our deity worship and service that we perform, the prayers that we perform. And Srila Prabhupada writes about this. He, back in the second chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, divine and divinity and divine service, several of these purports, and I'll read from one of them in just a moment. But he basically says, we'll begin to manufacture our own understanding. If we're not given proper understanding from the devotees of the Lord, the Guru, the spiritual master, and the words of the Supreme Lord himself, we'll begin to manufacture our own understanding. Our prayers will be prayers that we'll use based on our own speculation, our own finite understanding of what we know up till now. We'll interpret things in a certain way. Oftentimes, the mind will interpret based on its own desires and needs, not based on the actual reality. The false ego will overcome the intelligence. The intelligence will be manipulated under the influence of the false ego, and therefore the mind will become the servant of the senses. It will serve in a way that will satisfy our bodies and false sense of self. We see this happening sometimes. And therefore, it is essential to want to hear. Now, going back to the point that sometimes hearing is a struggle. Srila Prabhupada, in the 14th verse of the second chapter of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the translation of this verse, it says, "Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees." In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, "Especially in modern society, all activities are more or less dependent on hearing and glorifying. Any man from any social status becomes a well-known man in human society within a very short time if he simply is glorified, truly or falsely, in a daily newspaper. Sometimes political leaders of a particular party are also advertised by newspaper propaganda. And by such a method of glorification, an insignificant man becomes an important man within no time." We see this, right? Just some ordinary person, they are constantly being talked about. All of a sudden, for no reason at all, people just start talking about them. A movie star, or sometimes we find these, especially nowadays, these they're like self-created stars, or so-called, famous people, and they travel around, they have TV cameras that just, or now you just use your cell phone and you just keep posting it on social media. What you're doing, okay, they're sitting there, they're cooking, they're doing the laundry, they're going out to shop, they're saying, okay, this is what I'm buying today. They film their family life. And they put it out there for people to watch, and then people just start watching it. And then they tell their friends about it. And next thing you know, millions of people start watching and following these people. And you think, okay, well, what is their talent? What is their skill? Nothing. All they're doing is just filming their life, putting it out there, and they have to add some drama in there to make it, more exciting. And then people just follow it. Before that, now newspapers aren't as, prevalent because we have social media. But before that, it was the newspapers. And every day they would fill up 100 pages of of sheets of paper, fold them together, and you'd have, millions of people receiving it. And they flip through the newspaper, understanding what's going on today. Okay, this person's famous. Okay, this person, there's crime that happened over here. This person graduated from school. This person died. This person. Every day, people would just absorb themselves. And people are attracted to it. People are attracted to this hearing about other people. And that was the purpose of this purport. Srila Prabhupada is pointing out that it's not that the hearing process is something foreign to us. It's what we're hearing about is not always so attractive to us. And most of society is attracted to hearing about the glorification of sports figures. You can turn on sports talk radio, and I don't know if they have that in Harrisburg, but here in Philadelphia, there's 2 stations that every day for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can just hear about what do you think is going to happen in the game. I think they should fire the coach. This player they should get rid of. Why don't they trade for this player? All day long. I just want to talk about what happened in the game, what's going to happen in the upcoming game, and then, who should get fired and who should get hired. And they all get the opportunity to play as if they were the managers of the team and talk about if they were managers, this is how they would do it. This is how people pass their time. It's interesting to see it through that lens. So Srila Prabhupada continues in this purport. There may be some temporary reactions to such propaganda, but there is no permanent effects. Therefore, such activities are a waste of time. The actual object of glorification is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has created everything manifested before us. We have already broadly discussed this fact from the beginning of Jamadi Asha Shloka, which is the first of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The tendency to glorify others and to hear others must be turned to the real object of glorification, the Supreme Being, and that will bring about happiness. So this is what we can learn from these sages in Naimisharanya. They were already liberated, but and therefore they understood the real object of their affection, which is the real object of the glorification, is the Supreme Being. It is not the worldly life that goes on around us. Because although this gives us some temporary sense of gratification, we hear about, we learn about, we speak about, we tell others. Oftentimes, this is in the realm of gossip. And if we do it too often, we feel like we've become a little bit dull. And when we form a society around these things, Srila Prabhupada says there's no permanent effect. So we can't really become happy. We just keep chasing after the next story and the next news and the next headline. And then we talk about it. We talk about it at work. We talk about it on the train. We talk about it here and there. But it won't satisfy us. It won't transform our life. Srimad Bhagavatam has the ability, if we study it, we hear about it with enthusiasm, to change our life. to learn about Krishna, who we glorify. And that will change within our hearts. So now our devotional service can become with love. It's no longer just a ritual. We're actually doing it out of love. And we learn about these great devotees of the Lord who are being glorified in the Srimad Bhagavatam and how they've overcome so many obstacles and how we can too. How the Lord's mercy is there at every moment. Then we can derive great satisfaction from hearing about. When we come to the temple, we'll want to sit in the front row and hear. When we listen on Zoom, we'll be attentive and hear and have many takeaways. We'll ask pertinent questions to the speaker because we're listening carefully. Mostly, we'll find satisfaction. That which is not an enduring satisfaction, a lasting satisfaction. That which is not there in the propaganda that is put out in worldly life. One thing we started doing in Philadelphia is for our programs, we would just put down start time and end time. And we stopped putting down what the individual programs would be. Class from this or discourse from this time, artik at this time, of course they know prasadam is usually at the end, but if there's other activities that we do, abhishek or other things. We want to encourage people to really embrace and not just kind of pick and choose where they feel would be for them, but come for the whole program. And then maybe they'll get an opportunity to sit and hear. Encourage people during that time when it's time to hear, to turn off their cell phones, put it on, and not just vibrate mode, but actually there's, do not disturb sign. Because this is a time when that is why the do not disturb aspect of your phones are put in there. Because you want to be, when you're in something that is very important and you don't want to be interrupted, not even by the temptation of a beep or a buzz or a vibrate, or even the temptation to want to just slide out and say, okay, let me just check real quick if somebody responded to my text that I sent earlier. You want to be focused. One-pointed attention. And then encourage people to come close. It's funny, sometimes people, they want to stay in the back because, it's an easy out, right? If I need to slip out, I don't have to walk through a bunch of people. We can visualize the intensity that these devotees are from Namesharanya. You can see this intensity that they have, eagerness to hear. We want to develop that as well. And then lastly, we should find ways to try to, sometimes our methods have to change a little bit. Our processes to make the hearing process more encouraging. Sometimes devotees, they do that. They do classes in different ways to engage people, to bring out their, to bring out their eagerness, or to make it more interesting for them. So for us, we also have to be very cognizant of that. Sometimes, the speaker will go on for a very, very long time, hour, 2 hours. And they feel they're doing a service because it's the hearing that's going to purify you. So the more I speak, the more purification you will be there. But the speaker has to also know his audience. And what can the audience take? What is the audience going to, what will they latch on to? And the speaker may be very elevated, But if the students are elementary, you have to come down and you have to speak to their level in order to hear them. Just a quick remembrance of Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. They had him in Philadelphia, and there's the early 2000s, 2001, I believe. And he was speaking to this group of people who were very eager to hear from him. There was a subculture that was forming in Philadelphia, in this aspect of Philadelphia, whereas within the African American community, there was very kind of spiritual mysticism, bringing some of their religion and culture from Africa, and as well as kind of integrating it with yoga and some of the principles from India. And it was kind of quite interesting. And Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj understood it very well. And he spoke about it in such a way. He spoke so that we invited him to speak, and really just completely the whole, even this small room, I mean, so many people came, and they were just so packed in. You could hear a pin drop. The attention was so focused that everyone had. And he would bring people to a common understanding, and like he was able to draw them in, and everybody was just just kind of savoring every word that he was saying. And then he would gradually develop, throughout the talk. So it just gradually bring people along, and you could just see the enthusiasm that they had, and they all walked away with such a great appreciation for Krishna consciousness. So he was able to speak in a way that the audience could hear. So that is also, a challenge we have to, make this hearing process more and more available for people, is that we have to find ways to speak and understand the audience, so that the hearing, will be more and more available and attractive to everyone. So this is the process. The one last thing that Srila Prabhupada mentioned is that there's a purity to the sages of Naimisharanya, and Sukadev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. There was no really outside forms of mysticism. I never heard of this relationship between guru and disciple, where the guru would shock the disciple and the disciple would fall unconscious. But it seems like it was quite prevalent in India to make some type of external show. People falsely falling into this mood of ecstasy and falling on the ground, or performing some type of occult mysticism, to make it attractive. There is a purity, it's not some type of pop culture. It was the purity of heart and the purity of subject matter that is present. Krishna consciousness is not dependent on any type of external arrangements. And we can see this from the purity, just sitting down and hearing. And therefore the message that was conveyed was purely heard, received, and realized. Okay, I'll stop here, see if there's any comments, questions, or takeaways from today's class. Hare Krishna.
Dronacharya Prabhu, thank you so much for such a wonderful class. I have to say that you touched on many, many, many points. And as you're speaking, I could definitely relate to everything that you were sharing. So, thank you for touching on so many points. Really, really amazing. I would like to ask devotees if you have any questions, any comments, any clarification or takeaway, like we've heard so much about takeaways and how it's important to sit up front and hear and, get at least one takeaway realization from every class that we hear. So important. So please, you can either share in the chat or you could unmute yourself and share. So please do so. Dronacharya, there are 2 points, and the first point that really I think you touched upon, but if you could expand on it, Prabhu, is in the beginning sentence of this purport, the first sentence, Srila Prabhupada used the word ardent student. What is an ardent student, or how can we develop the mood of being an ardent student?
So the word ardent, dictionary definition of ardent means enthusiastic or passionate. So we can see there's a difference between, so a person who's very eager, they want to know, they're devoted, they're regular, they're regulated, there's a great sense of sincerity. That is an ardent student, as opposed to like a passive student, compared to somebody that's going to school, right? I got to get up today. All right, got to go. Come on. The parents telling them, let's go. Come on. You have to have your breakfast. You got, come on. You're going to be late. We've, all parents have been there, right? Come on. Oh, I have to go to school? Is it Friday yet? You just don't want to be there, but have to go, right? So that's like a passive student that just has to, you just have to go through it, to go through the motions and get your certain number of days in, so you qualify for, your education, and you can go on and get your degree, your high school degree at some point. And you just kind of go through the motions, do the minimum. As a person who would just be like, they're really understanding, they're feeling it, and they're just like, wow, this is really interesting, and I want to learn more, and I just can't wait. It's like it's a storehouse of knowledge, and it's like the parent is telling them at night, you have to go to bed. Come on, you're gonna, you need your hours of sleep, and they'll say, okay, I'll just give me a little bit more time. I just want to, finish going over this assignment because I really want to get it right, and or they're coming home and telling you, guess what I learned in school today? We don't see that too much. Usually you say, what'd you learn in school today? Yeah, not much. What do you mean not much? Well, it was just the same, So we have experience from the kind of the scholastic, mundane kind of level of public education, where we have this kind of passive. So in a topic that is so important as how do we get out of this material world? How do we find ourselves here in this material world, where we're suffering all the time? How do we overcome and become, instead of servants of our senses, how do we become masters of our senses? And how do we align ourselves with Krishna so that we can be in control of our destiny instead of letting our senses and our material desires control our destiny? Something as important that will determine our future for eternity. To be able to take it very seriously, to be eager about it and consistent about it, is a challenge. The way to do it is to understand the importance of the subject matter. Just like any type of sadhana, at first, sometimes it is met with some enthusiasm, along with some level of weaning or detaching ourselves away from our material desires. So it's just like the child with jaundice, or the person with jaundice, that they, sometimes what we taste, it's maybe not as sweet, even though we know, sugar has sweetness. Sometimes if you have jaundice, you don't taste the sweetness. But by continuing to take the sugar, the sweetness will automatically reawaken within our taste buds. So sometimes we have to go through this process of the sadhana bhakti at the beginning levels of sadhana bhakti, where we're transforming our desires. And that's why I mentioned that it's helpful not to make it as difficult as possible for people. We want to make the hearing process more relishable. And sometimes that means shorter segments. Sometimes, and again, you have to know our audience, and we should not be intimidated to try new things in presenting Krishna consciousness. I mean, see, that's what different acharyas did. They great devotees, they're trying to meet people where they're at. And the format and stuff like that isn't as important, but is the message going to somebody's heart? And are they becoming awakened by the message of Lord Krishna?
Thank you so much, Dronacharya. Yeah. And the point that you also mentioned in your class that really hit home for me, I have to say, or gave me a very nice realization is blessings. When you're mentioning that sometimes devotees think, oh, I just come and see the deities and I get blessings and I'm all good, and as opposed to the hearing. And then because that's where we count our blessings, is from the hearing. And what I really liked from what you said was which very much reflects to what Srila Prabhupada said in the purport here, that Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadev Goswami was serious performers of the first two important items, namely the process of chanting and the process of hearing from the 9. So, putting what Srila Prabhupada said and putting what you said about, taking the time to come to the temple, come to the class and sit and hear, and not just see the deities and go home and, okay, I'm all covered for the week. That was a very nice reflection for me. I go through that too, Prabhu. Yeah, you and I go through the same thing, but I go through that too here. But yes, I feel, and what is so interesting, Dronacharya, is that in the 9 processes, right? Pada Sevanam is like 4 or 5 down from Shravanam Kirtanam. So it actually shows that the blessing starts from hearing and chanting. Then we go down. So that was also another realization that I got. So wow, yeah, if only we could really address or understand that would be really, really amazing. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, it's thank you for that takeaway. We are it's very important, because the hearing and chanting, it should be like the foundation for those other aspects of devotional service. So we come together, we perform some service. We have various, Seva days where we're serving the Lord, serving the temple, serving, different. And obviously these can be done without intensive hearing and chanting. Sometimes you just have a person says, hey, I brought a friend, and they never heard her chanted before. And we say, yeah, sure, you can do some service. And that has an ability to awaken a feeling within them. But if you really want to cultivate that, because if you want to develop love for Krishna, you got to know Krishna. You got to know who you're, somebody, who is this God that you're worshiping? And well, I don't know. I just know when I go, I feel good. The depth can only go so far, right? It's just sentimental at a certain point. So, yeah.
And that's a nice reflection from Colby. He says, Hare Krishna, thank you for your deep insight and comments on this morning's topic of hearing and chanting, much of which resonated deeply within me, Haribol. Thank you so much, Colby. Yes. And adding to what Colby said, I think it's so important that you were mentioning in your class, and everything you said, Dronacharya, is like I could reflect, I could relate, because like this whole English class, mine was history in the mornings. It was just boring. I did find myself sleeping. And interestingly, like even when you're talking about Mangalarti and trying to stay awake for Bhagavatam class, I could completely relate to him, my Gita Nagari days. To attend Mangalarti, I'm like, okay, I can't keep awake from Bhagavatam class. But yeah, I think the solution to wanting to increase our desire to hear is to keep hearing. No matter how tired we are, just keep hearing, and then it just becomes a habit, I think. Then we just, over time, get the taste. Like what you talked about, the sugarcane, enjoying this.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing points. I really hope devotees listen to the importance of coming and hearing, and not just coming in at the end of the temple program. And I do like your trick, Prabhu, of not putting the what's next agenda. I get that a lot. What's the program? I'm like, let's come first.
Yeah.
I get that quite a bit too. Interesting. We can go on forever, Dronacharya. Would like to ask the boys if any other questions, any comments, any reflection, anything. Okay, if there isn't, yeah, we passed 9. I just remembered. Thank you for pointing it out. Would like to remind you, boys, to please join us this evening for our Bhagavad Gita Circle reading program. It is this evening at 6 o'clock, and we are continuing chapter 13. And the chapter is entitled The Nature and Joy and Consciousness. So please do join us. Until then, thank you so much, Dronacharya, for this very nice, amazing food for thought class. Amazing points. Thank you so much. And thanks to all the devotees. Vancha kaptubhyascha kripasindabevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Have a wonderful, blessed Krishna conscious day.
Jai. You too.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.